Stay on with us as we're tracking some other significant developments. We're now learning that the United States has approved the sale of fighter jet spare parts and repair kits to Taiwan, totaling $330 million. This marks the first potential arms transaction since U.S. President Donald Trump took office. The Pentagon has stated that the deal will help Taiwan maintain operational readiness of its fleet, which includes F-16 fighter jets and C-130 transport aircrafts. Taiwan, which is self-governed, strongly rejects Beijing's claims of sovereignty over the island. China, meanwhile, considers Taiwan as a breakaway province and has warned of possible military action to assert its control. The Pentagon, meanwhile, says this sale will help Taiwan defend itself against future threats. The transaction is part of ongoing U.S. support for Taiwan amidst growing tensions with China. Still with us on the broadcast is Dr. Asta Chata. Lately, we've seen the U.S. administration, in a way, not exactly distance itself, but also not openly engaging with the Taiwanese. There were reports coming in earlier that a Taiwanese delegation was not allowed to even use U.S. airspace while heading to Latin America. What do you now make of this defense deal that has come in? Of course, upgradation of F-16s and C-130 aircraft is what is in focus. And how does this figure in US's larger Indo-Pacific strategy?
Thank you, Pia, again for having me to discuss this pertinent issue. I mean, you're right when you said that at some point in the past we did see a slowdown, at least of or some sort of a backtracking of United States to not bring the Taiwan issue to the front. Specifically, we saw that in President Trump and Premier Xi's meeting that happened on the sidelines, right? I mean, this, at least US approval of sales should be seen more like a legal obligation in that way, because, US has been trying to make these defense services in some way available to Taiwan because they want Taiwan to maintain self-defense capability. That's what they say. And in US's own words, it's to help Taiwan meet current and future threats by maintaining some sort of operational readiness. So given that they have approved the sale of, spare parts for the F-16 fighter jets that already Taiwan maintains, this should be seen more of as a continuity of that relationship. Now, that being said, it does also in some way ease the sort of tension that was getting generated at some point, seeing that President Trump did not want to bring the Taiwan issue to the fore when discussing things with China. But looks like the Taiwan issue, at least in some measures when it comes to defense, articles sale or defense services sale, I think it's kind of back on the table. And the United States must be expecting some strong response from China once again, because it once again shows how US is very heavily invested in East China Sea security, and the fact that they have agreed to make these sales or resume these sales at some level or continue them, does show that Taiwan remains important to United States, not just in its wider Indo-Pacific security vision and strategy, because Taiwan is at the core of that as well, but also the fact that the US is looking actively to protect the global supply chains, particularly in the semiconductor industry.
Okay, ma'am, with that, I'd like to thank you for taking our time and, of course, explaining this context and your perspective to our viewers. We're tracking further updates. We're now learning that China has called on the Netherlands to withdraw its measures related to the ongoing dispute over chipmaker Nexperia. In a statement released on the 13th of November, Chinese Commerce Minister Wang Wentao has urged the Dutch government to take concrete actions to resolve the issue. Minister Wang has made these remarks during a meeting with his Spanish counterpart in Beijing, emphasizing that China expects the Netherlands to translate its verbal commitments into tangible steps. Wang has also reiterated China's intention to maintain communication with Dutch authorities in a rational, professional and responsible manner as the situation continues to progress. With us on the broadcast is Mr. Andrew K.P. Leung, a strategist focusing on China's policy as well as its economy. We've recently seen China take steps to ease its own curbs on chips manufactured by Nexperia, which was seen as a move to at least revitalize manufacturing as far as electric vehicles is concerned. Do you think Netherlands will now live up to its verbal commitments and withdraw its own measures that it had made imposed back in 2021 under pressure from the United States?
Well, let's not mix the control of rare earths and other elements as it applies to Nexperia, whose headquarters based in the Netherlands, with China's control of the critical rare earths across the globe, targeted as a response or countermeasure against President Trump's tariffs. The two are quite separate. In the case of the Netherlands, this company, Nexperia, was established or has been established in the Netherlands and by the China's parent company based in China to manufacture legacy chips. Legacy chips means not the high-end chips, but very popular lower-end, largely the chips largely used by most products around the world across the globe, including those in European companies and European production processes. So this supply of the legacy chips is from this Dutch the company based in the Netherlands, but it's under the governance, the control of the parent company in China. Above all its chips are supplied by the parent company. Now, what has happened is that the Dutch government somehow seized control of this Dutch-based company by trumping up all sorts of charges against its chief executive. On the ground of corruption and all sorts of things, but invoking a age-long Dutch law to seize control of the company. That, of course, angered Beijing. Obviously, Beijing sees this as a kind of unilateral action, probably allied with American interests to contain China. And so that's China's hit back since then by seizing the control of these chips from the parent company, and that obviously caused no end of problems because they don't. Although they produce the chips, but many of the components come from Beijing, come from China. So I think the Dutch company is now finding it as in a contrary and is trying to seek some sort of accommodation, and is now sending its representatives to talk to China on the ground. But I think that they know where the dynamics are. Without the supply of these key elements to this Dutch company, which is now seized by the Dutch government, there's no way that they can carry on the production. And as I said, they're supplying a lot of legacy chips around Europe. But this is quite different from the stranglehold on the critical rare earth elements that go into products in throughout the United States, including F-35 fighter jets, because that is seen by China as a very effective countermeasure against Americans' tariffs. So the two are quite separate. On the American side, Beijing still maintains this regime of control, even though now paused for 1 year as a result of the deal in Busan between President Xi and President Trump. But since before then, China has already doubled down on the global control system of these rare earths by requiring the granting of permits where those buyers are, because the fear is that some of the European buyers could later on supply these chips back to the United States. That this global control is not targeted to the world. It's basically strengthening China's countermeasure against Trump's tariffs war. But this is quite different from the Nexperia company, now seized unilaterally by the Dutch government, and that company supplies only legacy chips. So both sides are now trying to seek an accommodation on this Nexperia company as a result of this latest visit of Dutch officials to China.
Indeed, and I also want to understand what are the interests of other countries in the European Union. We do know that China is the largest EV manufacturer in the world, but there are automobile industry is also rather strong in Germany as well. So in light of this context, could we see pressure being mounted from Netherlands, fellow EU countries, in order to expedite it to withdraw its measures on next period?
I think that there's some interaction between the Nesperia case and the China's global control of the rare earth system as that applied to the European Union. Because on the Nesperia side, as I explained, there is a question of legacy chips. The chips, these are by no means the high-end chips, but they are absolutely necessary for the production of a lot of products. In Europeans' production facilities. And then, of course, the Caesar of Expedia caused a lot of problem in the supply and value chain. So there's one dimension. On the other dimension, as China's doubled down on the global control of critical rare earths as a countermeasure against Trump's tariffs, this global control system requiring the granting of permits also affects or slow down the supply of the essential rare earths to a lot of European companies. Not least, of course, the Europeans, since the past couple of years, has been distancing itself from China, which is, of course, seen also as a threat, and also some of the European nations are American allies in a global kind of confrontation with a rising China. So I think that there are different dynamics involved, but because of President Trump's indiscriminate tariffs war affecting even its European traditional allies, so the Europeans are also trying to seeking to recalibrate the relationship with China. So with all these different dynamics involved, and that's why the European nations are trying to work out a way to seek a better accommodation without embracing China, without terribly offending the United States, is trying to find a way which suit the interests of European manufacturers and producers.
Indeed, sir. With that, I'd like to thank you for taking out time and, of course, explaining all of that to our viewers. On that note, we're shifting focus to more development.